The purpose of this video is to introduce you to the Human Dimensions Risk and Safety Maturity Matrix. This matrix shows the kinds of steps that need to be considered if an organisation is to consider themselves to be world class. So where do we start? Well, we need to begin by thinking about complexity over time. And so the foundation of risk and safety maturity is to consider a range of controls. The first control is administrative. The second, usually legislation and regulation, are considered. Then as an organisation matures, it begins to consider and improve engineering controls and technological controls. And technological controls really have an emphasis on design. The final foundational stage of developing risk and safety maturity is systems. These five combine form what I call primary levels of risk and safety consideration. But they're not the whole story. They're just the foundation. Many organisations do these five quite well. If an organisation and its leaders want to step up to risk and safety maturity, they need to do more than concentrate and just be vigilant on these five. In fact, some organisations spend a great deal of time marking time on the fifth step of systems controls, believing that that's the maximum that they can do. If we want to step beyond these foundational controls, we need to consider other influences and influencers. The next step beyond foundations, the first step, is to consider behavioural and cognitive influences. These are the people who help us step beyond systems and technological thinking to consider human factors at work. When we have behavioural and cognitive influences in our organisation, we then begin to consider human, social, psychological influences, socio-political influences, and I call these the secondary level of risk and safety maturity. When we step up into these three, we then go way beyond engineering, technological, and systems thinking only. We begin to understand that many of the behaviours, many of the decisions, and many of the judgments in organisations come from the unconscious, come from social arrangements, and come from the way humans think. But even these are not enough. In order to step beyond the secondary stage of risk and safety maturity development, we need to consider cultural influences and subcultural influences. I call these the tertiary level of risk and safety maturity. It's not until we really grasp these 10 steps, or step beyond the first step of systems, that we really will have any chance of reaching or claiming some level of world class in the way we manage risk and safety. When we get to this level, this is what Carl Weick calls a high reliability organisation. This is really the total safety spectrum. So there's the matrix, but there's more. What I've done is I've put on the left-hand side the 5 stages of Patrick Hudson's safety culture development to see how this maps against the risk and safety maturity matrix. And the first stage on the left there is the pathological stage. This is the culture that really doesn't care a great deal about risk and safety. It doesn't even get administrative, legislative, or regulations right. It doesn't even give them a focus. Then the next stage of Hudson's is the reactive stage. They're cultures that only attend to risk and safety because they're forced to, or compelled to by the regulation or the act, or by some form of policing. Only then do such organisations give attention to engineering and regulatory controls. The next stage, which is the most common stage of organisations, in fact most organisations, is the calculative stage. This is still pre the secondary stage of risk and safety maturity and focuses primarily on counting. Such organisations confuse the idea that recording injuries or recording lost time injuries or recording medical treatment injuries or recording negative or lag indicators are a measure of culture. Calculative organisations tend to mark time on the system step, and so when they think about improvement, they just think of greater vigilance in systems, the volume of systems, increasing systems, multiplying systems, and all this does is further flood workers and force them into a mindset of tick and flick. If we really want to step beyond the foundations, beyond the 5 steps, we need to attend to what Patrick Hudson calls proactive factors, human factors. These are usually transferred through our behavioural and cognitive influences, but they focus on human, social, psychological influence and socio-political influence. When an organisation and its leaders mature beyond this, they then become truly generative. That is, they understand that the foundation is in fact the wrong way round. When we really attend to subcultural and cultural influences, we then understand that the 5 stages of foundations which we used to think were important, in fact, diminish to some extent, and in fact don't really become the primary driver for what we do in our organisation. We no longer do things because we have to. We do things because we want to. We do things because we own our own sense of risk and our own sense of safety. This is the focus of human dimensions, on the top 5 steps, on the secondary and tertiary layers of risk and safety maturity. And so on each one of these steps, human dimensions provides some programs. In order to help organisations step beyond technological and systems-only approaches to safety and risk, we have programs based on perception, learning, and sometimes having to unlearn poor approaches or poor mindsets to tackling risk. We have a program called One Brain, Three Minds. This program introduces people to the idea that the unconscious needs to be understood and the subconscious needs to be understood when it comes to the way people make decisions about risk. The major program which helps organisations jump beyond a systems-only approach to risk and safety is the Walk, Talk, Talk, Walk program. This is a program that concentrates on the skills of conversation on site, perception and motivation. The next program is a Seek program. This uses prior knowledge to help participants understand that even the way we investigate incidents and events is conditioned by a technological and systems-only approach to learning, to regulation, to legislation. This often ends out being a witch hunt or a fault-finding hunt more than it needs to be. So the Seek program brings social, psychological influences to play in the way we investigate events. The next program is the Think program. This is a leadership program that helps leaders think more creatively and imaginative about the way their organisations tackle risk. The 9th step is the Risk program. The Risk program is based upon the book Risk Makes Sense and shows organisations and leaders different ways of viewing risk and ways of viewing risk that are more learning-centred and people-centred. On the top step, we come to Lead. Lead is a leadership program and a complementary program is Care. Both programs concentrate more on social, psychological and psychosocial influences in the way risk and safety is managed. So there it is, the Human Dimensions Risk and Safety Maturity Matrix. If you'd like to know more about the programs that Human Dimensions deliver, or you'd like to know more about primary, secondary and tertiary layers in risk and safety maturity, you can contact on email or on phone, and the details are on the website. Thank you.